This is another Red Shirt Friday weekly recap in the Oregon Standoff Trial. Trent Luce, I'm shooting this one just for you. Not only do I have my red shirt on, but I'm out on a rural route. The rural route right in front of our place in Kanosh. So anyway, I want to kind of sum things up. I think this is probably about, this is one of the last weekly recaps that we'll have in the case, because I think it's probably going to wrap up next week, the way things are going. It's been a short week this week, but there have been a lot of interesting witnesses, a lot of interesting evidence has been presented in the case. One of the most interesting witnesses this week was a paid FBI informant by the name of Terry Linnell, who testified for the defense. And to kind of summarize her testimony in a nutshell, she said that while she was at the refuge for approximately 2 weeks, she did not witness any illegal activity. So she testified that she didn't see anything while she was there and that would cause her to be concerned, or that the FBI ought to be concerned about, or that the Department of Justice ought to prosecute the case for. Today at trial, it came out that there had actually been a total of 15 paid informants working for the government and the FBI. That's a large number. The government has resisted identifying who all of those paid informants are. And it's interesting that they haven't come forward with evidence from most of those during their case when they were putting on the prosecution's case. So the conclusion that you have to draw from that, from my perspective as an attorney, is that those paid informants didn't really come up with a whole lot of evidence that was useful in the case, that the government felt like it wanted to put on in the case as part of its prosecution case in chief. Now, another interesting witness was Rusty Hammond. He is the son of Dwight, brother of Stephen Hammond, and he testified yesterday that the Hammond family had been threatened by the government and the FBI if they associated with or continued to communicate with Ammon Bundy. He testified, and he had previously provided a sworn statement to that effect that the judge ruled on and ultimately allowed him to testify that the Hammond family was threatened if they had any further communication or association with Ammon Bundy and his associates. Another interesting witness this week was a gentleman by the name of Rodney Glenn Cooper, who happens to be Sheriff David Ward's cousin. He testified about the various conversations that he had had with his cousin, Sheriff Ward, both before and during and the occupation. And he indicated to Sheriff Ward that he thought that Sheriff Ward was wrong about many of his assessments about these guys, the defendants in this case. And he said that in some of their private conversations, Sheriff Ward told him that he really wasn't that concerned about them. He didn't feel threatened by them, and he said he basically agreed with about 90% of what they were saying, and that under other circumstances they could probably be good friends. So that was another interesting piece of evidence that came in. The case is wrapping up basically with respect to the evidence, the defense evidence today, with probably the testimony of defendant David Fry. He's going to be wrapping up his testimony. He's on the stand this morning. That'll take a little while. He's describing why he went to Oregon, why he participated in the occupation, and why he stayed, why he ended up being the last man standing, the last holdout at the refuge. And there's an interesting article that we've posted on Range Fire about that, written by, it's in Outside Magazine. You can find that on this summary, basically our Oregon Standoff coverage, Part 2. You can find a link to that interesting article. One of the most interesting things I think that has come out of the case this week has been a statement by Judge Brown. And a lot of people say, the observers there in court have said, that she seems to have had a change of demeanor this week as all the evidence has come in the case, and as she has sustained hundreds, if not thousands, of objections there's still been a lot of evidence that's come in that basically supports the defense theory of the case. And so the question came up as to how much evidence she should allow to continue to come in, and to what extent that evidence was going to become cumulative. That was kind of the context for the discussion. And in the context of that discussion, she basically said that she can't even think of the right adjective to describe the abundance of evidence that the defendants have already presented that there was no conspiracy to impede federal officers. That was basically her statement, that she can't even come up with the right adjective to describe the abundance of evidence that they've already presented. So now to just kind of sum up where things go from here. The defense is just about ready to rest. When they rest, then the prosecution will have another opportunity to present rebuttal evidence. They'll have an opportunity to present some more witnesses. They've indicated that they'll probably call about 5 witnesses to present rebuttal evidence. Then at that point, the jury will be instructed by the court, and the parties, that is the prosecution and all of the defendants and their attorneys again, will have an opportunity to make closing arguments to the jury. And after the jury has been instructed, after they have heard closing arguments, then the case will be turned over to the jury to deliberate. It's anticipated that that will happen by midweek next week, and then it will just be a matter of waiting to see what the jury comes up with after that. So the case is winding down, and this is probably about the second to the last weekly recap in the case. So until next week, we'll see what happens.